Let me say something that might sound a little dramatic at first, but I genuinely believe it's true. Most people are not broke because they don't make enough money. They stay broke because they slowly build a life that becomes too expensive to escape. And that, in my opinion, is the #1 wealth killer no one talks about. Because when people discuss why someone isn't getting ahead financially, they usually blame the obvious stuff. They say inflation, they say student loans, they say the housing market, they say low wages, high taxes, bad luck, rich parents, or some secret system working against them. Now, to be fair, some of those things absolutely matter. They do make life harder. But even with all of that, there's one hidden problem that quietly destroys more wealth than almost anything else. And most people don't even realize it's happening while they're living through it. That problem is lifestyle inflation. And I'm not just talking about buying a Lamborghini the second you get a raise. That's too obvious. Most people aren't making reckless, cartoonishly stupid financial decisions. What they're doing is way more subtle, way more socially acceptable, and way more dangerous. They upgrade a little, a nicer apartment, a newer car, better restaurants, more subscriptions, more delivery, more convenience, more, I work hard, I deserve this. And before you know it, every extra dollar they earn is already spoken for. That's the trap. Because the moment your lifestyle expands to match your income, you lose the one thing that actually creates wealth: margin. Margin is what's left over after you live below your means. Margin is what gets invested. Margin is what gives you breathing room. Margin is what buys you freedom, time, and options. Without margin, even a high income can leave you financially stuck. You can make $100,000 a year and still feel behind. You can make $200,000 a year and still feel stressed. You can make more money than you ever imagined and still be one emergency away from panic. Why? Because wealth is not built by income alone. Wealth is built by the gap between what you earn and what you keep. And that's exactly why lifestyle inflation is so dangerous. It doesn't look like a problem at first. It looks like success. You got the promotion, so you move into the luxury building. You landed a better job, so you finance the nicer car. You've been doing well, so suddenly spending $50 on dinner doesn't feel like a big deal anymore. Individually, none of these decisions seem life-changing, but stacked over 5, 10, 15 years, they can cost you hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions of dollars in lost investments. That's the part people ignore. Every unnecessary recurring expense has a double cost. First, it costs you money today. Second, it costs you what that money could have become if you had invested it. That's where the real damage happens. Let's say someone spends an extra $1,000 a month just to maintain a more expensive lifestyle. Maybe it's the car payment, upgraded housing, dining out, random monthly services, impulse shopping, whatever. $1,000 a month doesn't sound insane, especially if income went up. But invested consistently over time, that $1,000 a month could grow into a life-changing amount of money. Not a small amount, not nice to have money, real freedom money. That's why the wealth killer isn't just spending, it's invisible opportunity cost. And opportunity cost is brutal because you never see the bill. Nobody sends you a statement saying, "Congratulations, because you kept upgrading your lifestyle, you just delayed financial freedom by 12 years. Nobody tells you that car didn't only cost you $700 a month, it also cost you compound growth. These answer. Nobody says that apartment upgrade didn't just increase rent, it reduced your future choices. But it did. And this is where things get even more dangerous. Lifestyle inflation becomes your identity. Once you get used to a certain standard of living, it no longer feels luxurious. It feels normal. Then anything less feels like failure. That's when people become financially trapped by their own success. They can't take a lower paying job they actually enjoy. They can't start a business because their monthly costs are too high. They can't invest aggressively because they need every paycheck. They can't take a break, pivot, or breathe because their lifestyle now requires them to keep running. They don't own their life anymore. Their expenses do. And honestly, that's one of the biggest reasons people stay unhappy even after earning more money. They thought more income would create freedom, but instead it created maintenance. Now they need to keep feeding the machine. This is why I always say if your income rises, your savings rate should rise too, not just your spending. Because the goal isn't to look rich. The goal is to become rich. And those are two completely different games. Looking rich is easy. It's financed. It's leased. It's rented. It's posted. It's visible. Actually becoming rich is quieter. It looks boring. It looks disciplined. It looks like restraint. It looks like saying no when you technically could say yes. And that's hard, especially in a world designed to make you spend. Every app wants your money. Every ad tells you to upgrade. Every social media feed normalizes luxury. Every convenience is one click away. So if you feel pressure to spend more as you earn more, you're not weak, you're human. The system is literally built to make discipline feel abnormal. But if you want wealth, you have to train yourself to delay the reward, not forever. Just long enough to build a foundation strong enough that your money starts working harder than you do. Because once investments begin covering your lifestyle, everything changes. You stop making decisions from fear. You stop tolerating things you hate just to pay bills. You stop confusing income with security. That's real wealth. So how do you avoid the #1 wealth killer no one talks about? First, keep your fixed expenses low for as long as possible. Fixed expenses are dangerous because they lock you in. A slightly more expensive habit is annoying. A much more expensive lifestyle is a prison. Second, every time your income increases, automate a larger percentage into investing before you get used to spending it. If you never see it, you won't miss it. Third, stop rewarding yourself with permanent expenses. Celebrate with one-time purchases if you want, but be very careful with anything that becomes a monthly obligation. And finally, ask yourself one question before every upgrade. Does this improve my life or just my image? That question alone can save you years of financial regret. Because at the end of the day, the biggest wealth killer isn't being poor. It isn't bad luck. It isn't even making mistakes. It's building a life so expensive that your future never has a chance. If you can avoid that, if you can keep your lifestyle flexible, your savings rate high, and your ego out of your financial decisions, you put yourself in a completely different category from most people. And ironically, the less you feel the need to look wealthy, the more likely you are to actually become it. So if you remember one thing from this video, remember this. The fastest way to kill your wealth is to spend every raise proving to the world that you got one. Don't do that. Build margin, protect flexibility, invest the difference, and let time do what flashy spending never will, make you free. If I asked most people what's stopping them from building wealth, I'd probably hear the same answers over and over again. I don't make enough. Everything is too expensive. I started too late. I'm waiting until I'm in a better position. And while all of those might feel true, there's one financial problem that quietly destroys more people's future than almost anything else, and almost nobody talks about it. It's not debt, it's not taxes, it's not even inflation, it's delay. Delay is the #1 wealth killer no one talks about. Because the most expensive financial mistake is not always losing money. Sometimes it's simply waiting too long to do the right thing. And that's what makes delay so dangerous. It doesn't feel like a mistake in the moment. It feels harmless. You tell yourself you'll start investing next month. You tell yourself you'll budget once things calm down. You tell yourself you'll learn about money after this busy season. You tell yourself you'll get serious after the next raise, and 1 month becomes 6. 6 becomes 2 years. 2 years becomes a decade. That's how wealth quietly slips away. Not through one giant disaster, but through small acts of postponement that seem reasonable at the time. And the reason this matters so much is because wealth is built on one thing more powerful than almost any amount of hustle: time. Time is the multiplier. Time is what turns ordinary monthly investing into extraordinary long-term results. Time is what gives compound growth room to work. Time is what makes small financial decisions incredibly important later. When you delay, you don't just lose money you could have invested. You lose the years that money needed to grow. That's a huge difference. A lot of people think wealth comes from picking the perfect stock, timing the market, or finding some incredible side hustle, and sure, that might help around the edges, but for most people, wealth is much simpler than that. Spend less than you earn, invest consistently, do it for a long time, don't interrupt the process, that's it. The problem is that a long time requires starting before you feel ready, and most people hate that. They want certainty before action. They want confidence before commitment. They want a perfect plan before a first step. But the truth is, most wealthy people didn't start because they knew everything. They started because they understood that waiting was more expensive than being imperfect. That's a lesson more people need to hear because perfectionism sounds smart, but financially it can be deadly. Think about how many people spend years researching investing without ever investing. They watch videos, read headlines, compare apps, worry about recessions, debate strategies, and all the while their cash sits there doing almost nothing. They think they're being careful, but what they're really doing is paying the price of hesitation. And hesitation has a cost. Not always today, not always visibly. But over time, massive. Let's say 2 people both want to build wealth. One starts investing a modest amount now, the other waits 5 or 10 years until they feel more stable, more educated, more prepared. Who wins? Usually the person who started earlier, even if they invested less, even if they made mistakes, even if they weren't perfectly optimized. Why? Because time in the market usually matters more than timing the market. And that idea is simple, but it changes everything. The scary part is that delay becomes addictive. The longer you wait, the easier it is to justify waiting a little longer. You say, well, I already didn't start last year, so what difference does a few more months make? A lot, actually, because every month you delay is a month you can never get back. And I think that's the part people emotionally disconnect from. They treat time like it's unlimited because the consequences are invisible in real time. Nobody wakes up after 1 year of procrastinating and feels financially ruined. Nobody notices the exact moment their future became more expensive, but those moments add up. 1 year of delay becomes more years of work, more stress, more dependence on your job, less flexibility later in life. That's why I think delay is worse than many obvious mistakes. At least when you make a visible mistake, you can learn from it. Delay is sneaky. It hides behind logic. People call it being realistic. They call it being cautious. They call it waiting for the right moment. But if we're being honest, a lot of the time it's fear. Fear of getting it wrong, fear of losing money, fear of looking stupid, fear of committing to a future version of yourself that's more disciplined than the current one. And I get that. Money feels emotional because money equals security. So people freeze, but staying frozen has a price too. In fact, for many people, the biggest risk is not taking action. Now, I'm not saying go do something reckless. I'm not saying throw money into random investments or pretend risk doesn't exist. What I am saying is this: there is a major difference between thoughtful action and endless delay. You do not need the perfect plan to open an investment account. You do not need to become an economist to understand basic personal finance. You do not need to hit some magical income level before building good habits. What you need is momentum, because momentum creates identity. The moment you invest your first dollar, you stop being someone who plans to invest someday and become someone who invests. The moment you track your spending, you stop being someone who should probably budget and become someone who pays attention. Those identity shifts matter more than people realize because wealth is rarely built through one giant decision. It's built through repeated actions that become normal. And normal is powerful. If investing is normal, you keep doing it. If saving is normal, your balance grows. If delaying is normal, your future shrinks. That's why the fix for this wealth killer is surprisingly simple. Start before you feel fully ready. Start small if you need to. Start imperfectly if you have to. Start with $50. Start with $100. Start with one automatic transfer. Start with one account. Start with one habit. Just start. Because the goal in the beginning is not to impress anyone. The goal is to break inertia. Once inertia is broken, improvement becomes easier. You can learn more, optimize more, earn more, and invest more later. But none of that matters if you never begin. And that's the message I wish more people understood. Your financial future is not usually destroyed by one catastrophic event. More often, it is slowly weakened by waiting to invest, waiting to learn, waiting to save, waiting to take control. So if you're watching this and you've been telling yourself, I'll deal with it later, take this as your sign that later is expensive, very expensive. The number one wealth killer no one talks about is not just bad decisions. It's delayed good decisions. And the longer you postpone them, the more your future pays the price. So start now. Start messy, start small, but stop waiting for some perfect version of life where discipline suddenly becomes easy. That version usually never comes. What does come is the result of what you do consistently from this point forward. And years from now, you're either going to be grateful you began today or frustrated that you didn't. The choice looks small right now, but financially, it could change everything.